do what feels right for your body. If you know that something feels off, don't be afraid to question it, and keep questioning practitioners until you find somebody who is going to explore it with you. Because if you feel like garbage, there's probably a reason for that. And just because somebody hasn't given you an answer doesn't mean there isn't an answer.
Welcome back to another episode of Becoming Ourselves, a work in progress podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Sigrist, joined by my co-host, Joel Sigrist. Shoot, we never practiced that. We probably should. We'll get to it eventually. We've got a lot. We're still a work in progress, one might say.
Amen.
We've got an exciting episode coming up for you today. We talked to Elena DiPerri, who is a whole health nutritionist.
A licensed nutritionist in South Carolina.
And talked to her a little bit about how to think about our bodies and how to eat a holistic diet and things like that. Slight disclaimer, we are diving in a little bit on bodies and health, and understand that can be a sensitive issue, a sensitive topic for people. And so If that's triggering or activating for anybody, we try to go about it in a really responsible way, but you don't need to listen to this one if that's scary.
And we do. I mean, I don't think that this is like this isn't like shaming, or it's not meant to be activating or anything like that. But this is a topic that, societally, I think right now is more triggering just in general. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep. But Elena,
use your own judgment. You're an adult. Unless
you're not, but that's the target audience, I guess.
Most of our audience, our analytics says most of our audience is adults, like upwards of 90%, so over 18. So the 10% of you that are kids listening to this, I don't know what to tell you. Just talk to a parent. I don't know.
I don't know.
We're not worried about you.
Yeah, there's bad words in this one, so 18 and above only, I'm sure is the.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Kids cannot hear bad words. That's against the law.
Never happened before, right?
We're not trying to go to prison.
I'm not trying to mess with that. Yeah.
No. Anyway, this is a fun episode, though. This is a fun episode, and I think Elena's a fun guest. Elena brings some fun energy. I think this is a good one. I think this is a fun one. Also, this is a more. She gets into some more technical topics about like some of the chemistry and some of the hormones and those sorts of things. I'll be honest, some of that went over my head. I struggled a little bit in this episode to fully stay dialed in, just because there's just for a couple of minutes there towards maybe the middle, towards the later part. I just was not able to focus. I was like, you lost me. You lost me. But Jesse stayed really in it. Jesse stayed way more engaged with that for that like 2-minute stretch. Jesse was dialed in. Elena was dialed in. Joel was off in his own world. So
Joel was just having a good time. He put himself on mute, took a drink of water. He was
listening through it again on second listen made a lot more sense than when I was in it doing the recording. But anyway. A fun episode. You get Jesse for the whole time. I dropped in the middle, but came back on, and Elena's there the whole time.
Stronger than ever. Yeah.
That's right. We made it. So,
but had a lot of fun. Hope you enjoy the episode.
Yes, if you have any thoughts or questions about it, feel free to text us. Really do. We enjoy that. We still have our book giveaway going on right now. So we don't talk about it in this episode, but Unreasonable Hospitality, which we talked about with Devin Barbin in last week's episode. Great book. Really would recommend it. And if you're curious about it, text us 503-893-2664, and we're giving away a copy. So you can still get in on that. It's not too late. We're giving that book away a week from today when you're listening to this, or the 17th. So next week's episode. So with all that being said,
let's get into it.
Well, Elena DiPerri, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. We are excited to have you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Elena DiPerri is a certified nutrition specialist and licensed nutritionist and holds a master's of science in human nutrition. After years of seeking help for her own hormonal imbalance, Elena found the answer in nutrition. After 10 years of working in the restaurant industry, she left her position as a pastry baker at Facebook headquarters to join the fitness industry. During this time, she knew she was meant for more. This led her to enroll in the University of Bridgeport's Masters of Science in Human Nutrition program. Since completing her program in 2021, she began obtaining her clinical hours required for her CNS and LN and founded Heal Holistic Nutrition. Since, Elena has helped dozens of individuals heal their guts and balance their hormones. Most importantly, she learned about the type of practitioner she wants to be, someone that is food inclusive and does not shame her clients, but rather educates and empowers them. And I think that's such an important piece. That's one of the reasons we wanted to bring you on.
So important.
Yes. Elena currently resides in Charlotte, North Carolina, with her partner, her 2 dogs, Bree and Blue, named after the cheeses, and her cat, Phoebe, after Phoebe Buffet. When she is not healing guts and hormones, you can find her listening to music, trying new restaurants, or enjoying the outdoors. Elena, thank you so much for coming on. Listening to music. What's the song today? What's the playlist you've had on?
Oh, gosh. So actually, one of my friends that I grew up with, he is in this band called Off-Road Minivan, and they just released a new album, or they're releasing some singles from a new album. So full admission, I am an emo kid at heart. I love my emo hardcore music, but honestly, it depends on the day what you'll catch me listening to. So
I love it.
Very
I love
fun.
it. Say the name of
Off-road
that band
minivan.
again.
Off-Road Minivan.
Oh, I heard opera minivan. Okay, off-road minivan.
Off-road, yep.
Okay, off-road minivan sounds more like a band name, but I like it. That's fun.
We'll have to check them out. We'll link them below.
We definitely will. We
Yeah,
definitely
they're so
will.
good. Yeah.
That's exciting. Very cool. So Elena, I want to hear you talk a little bit about, obviously we heard your intro, but I want to hear you talk a little bit about why does nutrition matter to you, and why is this something that you've been doing the last several years?
That is a really great question, and I could probably talk to you for an hour just about that question. So, and keeping it short and simple, I think, I heard a lot of things as a kid. Oh, you shouldn't eat that because you need to lose weight, or I had a crush on this boy when I was 12 years old, and I didn't have my sneakers for gym class. And I, on the bus told my friends, oh, I didn't have to do gym class today. I forgot my shoes. And he turns around and goes, well, you shouldn't skip gym. You need it. And so to this day, that has stuck to me. And then fast forward to being in the restaurant industry and just being a baker, you're just surrounded by cakes and cookies and all these baked goods all day, which there's nothing wrong with those foods, but when you're around them all day, what are you doing? You're eating sugar all day. And there was just one morning I looked in the mirror and I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life? There's a lot of alcohol, there were cigarettes, other recreational, drugs going on. And I was like, I need to get my shit together, essentially. And so, the restaurant industry is really hard and can be pretty toxic. It's, a pretty cutthroat industry.
Yeah.
And through kind of learning more about nutrition and wanting to make changes for myself, I realized that the restaurant industry was no longer serving me. And so I actually, I fell in love with a fitness studio when I lived in the Bay Area. And I was like, ooh, they're hiring. I'm going to apply for this job. And when I started working there, I was so excited. But gosh, it was such a letdown. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. People were just as mean, so to say. And I was really excited to venture into this, I don't know what the word is, kind of like a new lifestyle of inclusivity and acceptance and positivity. And it wasn't there. And I was like, what the hell did I sign up for? And so that kind of led me to I want to go back to school. What do I want to do? And at first I thought agricultural science, because how cool is that, to help with regenerative farming and all of those things. And that just wasn't in the cards for me at that time. The school I was looking at was in New York, and, my partner and I were not going back to New York. So then somehow I stumbled upon the University of Bridgeport's Master of Human Nutrition, and I was already interested in trying to be like a health coach for people who needed guidance on overall nutrition, etc. And so I was like, this is my opportunity to really dive in, to learn more, and to create a different career path for myself and different opportunity where I also get to help people who have kind of been brushed under the rug or have been ignored for not thinking, their symptoms were serious or that they mattered or that it wasn't in their head, etc. Long story short, that's, how nutrition got me here.
Yeah. I love it.
That's interesting. Yeah. And how did that affect your mental health, physical health, your holistic health, that career change?
That's a great question. Gosh, where do I even begin? I think it was actually really hard on my mental health at first, because in the functional medicine realm, which I love functional medicine, it does really great things, but it can also be really dangerous from a food standpoint, because it can get really restrictive really quickly of we shouldn't have gluten, we shouldn't have dairy, we shouldn't have nightshades, you shouldn't eat grains. And so now we're pulling all of these food groups out. That's not always the best thing that we need to do. But so when I was working at the spin studio, I lived no traffic, 40 minutes away. With traffic, an hour and 40 minutes away. So I would purposely wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go do Pilates, shower, whatever, and then stay at the studio until 5:30, take a spin class there, and go home. So I would say during that time, and even the beginning of, getting into my master's, I was all about fitness, until I experienced adrenal fatigue myself. And I felt like I lost that side of me, which we're bringing back now. It took me almost 2 years to fully heal from that aspect. So, the mental side of things, and you're hard on yourself, right? Well, if I'm not working out, am I eating the right foods? Is this going to make me gain weight? What is my body going to look like? How am I going to physically feel, right? So I think having those experiences allow me to be a practitioner who realizes how much the mental and physical side of things really affect your overall nutrition. And I think it just kind of gives me a leg up in helping guide them to be able to set boundaries and to make sure we're prioritizing our mental health or stress. And are we getting in movement in general? Does it need to be this 50-minute HIIT workout? No. Does a walk feel good for you? Yes. Okay, great. Do that. And so, I think there's a stigma of these are the things you have to do, but it doesn't always work for everybody. And going through that experience myself just really opened my eyes in a very different way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, it feels like because you've experienced the kind of whole situation, you're able to much more effectively walk with other people with empathy, with lived experience, with shared experience, in a way that somebody who is just like, oh, I've always been eating well, quote unquote, or whatever. It's like, just do what I do. Won't be able to relate as well, right?
Yeah, and that's, I think, the biggest difference between people think like nutritionists, oh, you're a glorified health coach. It's like, no, there's a lot of, science behind this. And if you do just need that accountability side of things, and health coach is great, but when your body systems aren't working adequately, you need to go see somebody else who knows how to handle those body systems.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you mentioned adrenal fatigue earlier. You've mentioned a couple of different things as far as like diet nutrition goes, and we're gonna get into more of those things later on. We don't have to, tackle all those this second. But you have mentioned to me before that you started Whole30 as like a first. That was like your first when you had this kind of I don't know, this come to Jesus moment, looking in the mirror and being like, well, I should change some things. I want to change some things. And that was like the first step for you. How have you kind of grown from your understanding from that first step into, okay, let me try Whole30, into you have a more nuanced understanding of nutrition now with a master's and having done some different things in it. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think the concept of Whole30 is really great, um, in the fact that it's just trying to teach you to eat real foods again. Because we think about all of these different diets that are out there. Whenever you go to the grocery store, how many items do you see labeled keto, right? And if
A
you actually
lot.
look at the ingredients, there's a bunch of crap in there, right? So I think the point of Whole30 and getting you back to just eating food is such a great concept. Where it gets dangerous is the restriction of it. Because what happens when you're done with those 30 days? You say, fuck it, I'm going to eat whatever I want. I got through this 30 days. Some people can't even make it the full 30 days. And you go on a binge spree. And so
Yeah.
that's where it can be really dangerous. And not everybody does the binging after the Whole30. But you think about, gosh, I really want that cookie right there. Oh, but I'm on Whole30. I can't do it. Okay, well, now you're off Whole30. You're back in a party, and now there's a huge plate of cookies. What are you going to do when everybody's not looking?
Yeah.
You're going to eat all of the cookies. And so it doesn't really teach you good eating behavior or good eating habits, but it does help you get back to eating real food.
And
Yeah.
can you for our audience kind of share what Whole30 is as an idea?
Whole30 is when we are not having sugar, no coffee or caffeine of any sort. I think you can have green tea, no alcohol, no gluten, no dairy. I think those are like them. You're essentially getting rid of those quote unquote inflammatory foods.
Okay.
And you are just eating whole grains, veggies, fruits, clean, lean proteins for this 30-day period. And
Gotcha.
when you've gone from eating a fairly processed diet to going Whole30, one, you're going to see pretty drastic results. It's also going to feel like it's this marathon that's never ending. Um, and it may or may not change your food behaviors before and after. A lot of people are like, oh, I gave up gluten and I feel so much better. But that's not always the case. And so it's really different for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So it's almost this like hard reset idea, but there's maybe not as much informed decision making about it. It's more of just like a cut everything, and for some people that works, and for some people that doesn't really help anything.
Yep.
Okay.
And for some people, it seems impossible because, gosh, we're trying to eat a certain way, or now we're eating these foods that we don't like. Like, I love roasted broccoli, but how many times can you eat roasted broccoli and boiled chicken, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not fun. So then you see these really highly palatable foods and you're like, oh my God, I want those. Like, screw this. I'm not going to do this. Or you'll be like, oh, I'll just start over again tomorrow. I'll start over again tomorrow. And again, not everybody is like that, but you need a lot of discipline to just eat, in this small window of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thinking holistically, like thinking about like the sustainability of that diet, that like you're not going to be able to do that forever. Like you're not going to be able to do Whole30 for, I mean, maybe you could do it for 30 days, but then on day 31, like now what's your plan, right? And you're living a lot longer than those 30 days. And I think that can be one of the things that is one of the pitfalls that comes with a challenge like that or with a plan like that.
Totally. And that's kind of a thing. It's like, well, what's the beyond? What's next? And now your rule book is gone. And so sometimes we try to stick to it, but then we think, ooh, I had a cookie, so I ruined everything. I'm just now going to get a pizza. I'm going to go order some Chinese food.
If
I'm
I've
going to go
lost
eat
already,
these
may as well go all
donuts.
in.
Right. Instead of saying, oh, I had a cookie that was really great and I'm going to move on and I'm really going to like have this wholesome, hearty meal, at my next meal, rather than, oh, well, I had the cookie, so fuck it. And all
Yeah.
is lost.
So when you're working with like a new client, when a new client comes to you, and they say, I'm having these health problems. I want to change my diet to address some of these health problems. What are some of the starting points that you go through to kind of address that question and break it down and understand where do we go from here?
Yeah. So a lot of my clientele comes from the fitness industry. So first question is, I'm making sure they're actually eating enough food, which a lot of times we're not, because how many years have we been told eat less, move more, and you're going to lose weight? Well, these women are eating way less and moving a lot more, and they're like, why am I gaining weight? Because your metabolism is shutting down. You can't keep up with these crazy HIIT workouts and not feed yourself. So that's my first step is, are we actually eating enough food? Then I go in, are we eating enough variety? So
Talk
I
about that.
always, yeah. So variety from a standpoint of grains, fruits, veggies. Essentially, we hear eat the color of the rainbow. And there's, a reason for that, because there's different vitamins, there's different minerals, really important polyphenols that are going to feed the bacteria in our gut. And that's kind of the main purpose, right? I see a lot of people for gut health. Food is prebiotics. We think we need to get, this supplement and that supplement for prebiotics. Just eat food, right? So when we're stagnant in our diet, or it's just consumed, a lot of processed foods, okay, if let's say I do want somebody to be on a gluten-free diet because maybe they have thyroid issues, I'm going to come at it as a point of, oh, like, you eat these tortillas. Have you ever had the siete almond flour or cassava flour tortillas? Ooh, are you willing to try them? Let's see if you like those, right? Because now we're swapping one product for something else, and now it's a different food. We're getting a little more diversity in the diet.
Gotcha.
That's very
Does
good.
that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like that feels on the surface level like that. My first reaction is that's more approachable too, because it's not like you said at the beginning, like it's not restrictive in the same way. It's an exciting new thing, and the psychology
Yeah.
of that feels really powerful.
Right. And, if Jesse, you came to see me tomorrow and you told me, I asked you for what does a typical day look like in food. And then I was like, actually, I don't want you to eat this food. I don't want you to eat that food. I only want you to eat meat and vegetables. You'd probably be like, screw this girl. I'm like,
Yeah.
never coming back. Like, that seems impossible.
Right. Well, and that feels also like pretty in line with a lot of different psychological, like therapy, or I'm in financial behavior, right? Financial planning. That's so much is like, if you just say you're right here, you need to get to here, be here, you're not going to do that. So it's like, let's make a path together. Let's see. And if you're trying to make behavior change, you also have to be meeting the client where they're at, meeting the other person where they're at,
Yeah.
and baby steps, right?
Yeah. And that is so huge, because there are some people that are like, I'm ready to do whatever you ask me to, and I'm ready to do it right now. I can tell you most of those clients come back to me, 3 days later, and they're like, I'm too overwhelmed. Can we, tone it down? And so some of my clients are like, this is it. This is all you're going to give me. And I have to tell them, you are going to be so overwhelmed if we try and, I want you to focus on just adding these foods rather than, okay, I want you to add all these foods and I want you to do mindful breathing and I want you to do this and I want you to do that. They're going to be like, oh my God, this girl's freaking crazy. And so when we approach it as, let's just tackle one thing at a time, it just makes it so much easier and so much more doable, because then we create a habit and then we can build upon that. So it's, okay, like I can do this. I see the change. And I think that's exciting for, majority of my clients.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the most effective action is the one you'll actually take, right? And so it's really easy to meet with you and you're like, hey, cut all of these foods, become gluten, dairy free, vegetarian, I don't know, whatever. And then I'm like, great, sounds good. Go home, don't do it. Come back. Hey, are you doing that? Yep. No progress. Great. And it's like, wait, why am I paying a lot of money for this, right? And so it's so much easier to
they feel like a failure, right? They're like, I failed you. I failed myself. And it's like, no, if you fell off the wagon, there's a reason for that. And something wasn't sustainable for you. So we need to kind of go and revisit and see what that was. I will say the only food that I recommend to all of my clients and to every single person not to eat are artificial sweeteners, because they are not food. They are chemicals that disrupt insulin signaling. They disrupt the microbiome. And most people are coming to me with hormone and gut issues. So that's literally the only thing that I'm like, okay, let's replace that with this.
Yeah.
And that's the one I'm like, it's gotta go. But otherwise, I'm like, oh, you want dairy? Okay. What about grass-fed dairy? Does that work for you? Okay.
Yeah.
This is kind of a basic question. You refer to like gut health. Is gut the stomach? Is that the whole digestive system? What's that look like?
Kind of all of the above. So when I refer to gut health, I'm really thinking the entire digestive system, because digestion starts in the mouth. Literally, when we chew food, there's that mechanical process of breaking food down. Our saliva has enzymes that start carbohydrate metabolism, where we're breaking it down. And then we swallow and food goes into the stomach. Your stomach is filled with hydrochloric acid, which stops carb digestion and starts protein digestion, because now we need to rip all of those amino acids apart from each other before we pass into the small intestine, where bile is released, and that is, for fat emulsification. So you hear people's gallbladders are being removed left and right. I'm like, oh my God, that is a vital organ. Don't take it out unless absolutely necessary. And then, within the intestines, there's the microbiome, which literally is all of the bacteria, fungi, protozoa. There's viruses, and it is a very beneficial part of our entire being. It affects hormone production. It affects mental health. And so many other aspects of our body. So when I say gut health, I'm really referring to the entire thing, because it could be an upper GI thing where we have stomach, liver, gallbladder issues, or it could be lower GI where it's small intestine, large intestine, colon.
Okay.
What are the symptoms and the ways that you can tell kind of inside of gut health where the problems are?
One thing I do is called a nutrition-focused physical exam. So here I'm asking about your skin, your teeth, your hair. I will literally have my clients stick their tongue out and show me their tongue, because part of what I'm doing there is seeing if there's any nutrient insufficiencies that we may have. And that goes hand in hand with digestion. That's one of the first things, because are we able to break down and assimilate nutrients and absorb them? Or are they just going right through us and we can't absorb anything, right? The other thing I ask about are just basic GI function. Do you have upper GI pain? Do you have burning in your stomach after you eat? Do you feel like your food is just sitting in your stomach? Do you have pain on your right side, right under your rib cage? I want to know if our liver or our gallbladder is a little inflamed and tender. And then, are we bloating? Are we constantly having gas? Do we get lower abdominal pain? And then I specifically ask my clients about their bowel movements. What color is it? What shape is it? What does it look like? Is it hard to go? Do you have, blood in your bowels? Do you have anal itching? Because that's going to tell me about yeast or a parasite. So there's so many questions and clues to ask for. Now, if shit kind of hits the fan and we're kind of unsure, or it's all of the above, a lot of times I recommend stool testing, where I can actually see what our commensal bacteria is like. So commensal, we think we feed bacteria, bacteria feeds us. So bacteria, that's going to make us neurotransmitters and vitamins, short chain fatty acids. So whenever I refer to commensals, I'm referring to those specific bacteria. What does inflammation look like? Are we breaking down those tight barrier junctions? So if you think of your GI tract like this, and in here, these are gap junctions. They hold the cells together. And this is what leaky gut is, or intestinal permeability. Those gap junctions start opening up and food proteins start seeping through. So now it can look like autoimmune disorders, because now you have food proteins in circulation where they shouldn't be. So we're going to sound the alarm and start creating antibodies. So this is why, if somebody has, Hashimoto's, we want to avoid gluten, because the structure of the gluten protein is nearly identical to the thyroid. And so that's how we can get higher antibodies. Kind of same thing with dairy and your pancreas with insulin. Casein, the protein in dairy, structurally very similar to the beta cells of the pancreas, which secretes insulin. So, we think about all of the type 2 diabetes that comes later in life. Well, what was this person's gut health like? And it's a really important question to ask, because I think everybody could use some GI help, whether they think so or not. But it tends to be the root cause for other dysfunction within the body.
That makes sense, that it's kind of, it impacts a lot of the body's processes. And when you've got problems in the GI system, it kind of, problems can show up elsewhere in the body too, that can feel unrelated.
Totally. Yeah. And when people are like, oh, I'm coming to you for hormone health, and I'm like, well, what's your gut like? And they're like, well, I poop maybe once every 3 days, or I have diarrhea 6 times a day. I'm like, okay, like that's where we need to start, because if we focus on balancing hormones now, it's going to feel like this impossible mountain that you're climbing. Like you're going to get to Mount Everest and you're going to get halfway up and you're going to fall right off, because there's such an interconnectedness between the two that you really need a healthy, intact gut for the hormone side of things.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you say anything more about the interconnectedness? Does the gut health feed into the hormones? Do the hormones feed into the gut? Is it both? Is it all?
Kind of both, right? Because we think about the pituitary in our brain is the command center. The hypothalamus stimulates to their signals to the pituitary signals elsewhere. And when it comes to gut health and hormones, the first question is, are we assimilating nutrients and absorbing them? So for adrenal hormone and sex hormone production, the precursor is LDL cholesterol. How do we get LDL cholesterol? Well, we think dietary fats, but also carbohydrates. Glucose is, broken down, packaged up in the liver. And that also contributes to LDL cholesterol. So one, are we eating enough food, right? Going back to, are we eating food? Okay, now are we actually able to break down and absorb the nutrients to make these things? So we also have to think about cofactors and coenzymes. So these are going to be vitamins, minerals, or other metabolites created within the body. Because those are the keys to the car, right? So magnesium, for an example, everybody, hears about magnesium is this coenzyme for over 300 reactions within the body. Yes. So what happens if we're not actually absorbing enough magnesium? Your body's going to pick and choose which reaction is more important over the other, right? And so magnesium is not only important for muscle function, but it's a cofactor for methylation, which this is how we can get rid of estrogen from the body. And then the last part that's really connected, and there's so many parts, but the last part I'll speak to is there is an enzyme created by bacteria in the gut called beta-glucuronidase. Beta-glucuronidase loves to reactivate certain metabolic byproducts in the body. So we think about estrogen again. So if we are detoxifying estrogen, and by detoxing, we're going through a hydroxylation reaction, and then we're methylating it so that it goes from the liver to the bowels where we poop it out. Well, if your beta-glucuronidase is really high and we're constipated, we're not having a bowel movement, we're just reactivating all of that. And now you're having all of these estrogen dominant symptoms that if we try and just fix the estrogen side of things without fixing the gut side of things, you're just going to be in this perpetual cycle of, why am I not seeing change? Because it starts in the gut.
Yeah, that makes some amount of sense. You got me with a couple of those big words. I was focusing really hard to get there, but I'm gonna try to summarize a little bit for myself and see so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But we've got kind of these hormones that are working, and if we're trying to adjust those at all, well, they use the gut, they use the bowel system, the GI tract system to make change there. So we have to make sure the gut's working properly to make the hormonal shifts that we want to do with the
beta-glucuronidase.
Yeah, say that one 3 times fast.
So beta-glucuronidase, so there's a system of detoxification. And when people say you don't need to support your liver, you don't need to support your kidneys, they're your organs of elimination, blah, blah, blah. Well, they don't run willy-nilly by themselves, right? They need nutrients to run adequately. So no, this doesn't mean do an apple cleanse or do a juice cleanse, but we need to feed it the things it likes for it to go. So from a hormone standpoint, where the liver is actively at work, right? Because we don't want all of these hormones in our system forever, right? Especially for you guys as men, your testosterone is going to be high in the evening, but you don't want it that high in the, at night. Same with cortisol, right? We need to break them down and get them out of our body. And so the GI tract, so the liver kind of, we'll say the liver deactivates these things, or the kidneys, and it sends it. So if it's through the kidneys, you're going to pee it out. But when it's through the liver, we're going back to the bowels so that we can actually fully eliminate it through having a bowel movement.
Yeah.
Does that make more sense?
Yeah. I think so.
we're kind of cycling through them, right? And so we want to be, I guess we're just talking about the connectedness of all of this, and we want to be treating all the different parts correctly, I guess.
Yeah. You want to make sure it's all functioning optimally.
We're gonna take a little bit of a step back. And earlier you talked about magnesium. talking about magnesium, and that's like something that I've often heard as like everyone's low in magnesium, like we should all be taking that like every day. Like that's something that like you talked about, it has whatever 200 reactions that like magnesium plays a role in.
Yeah, over 300.
Over 300,
A
yeah.
bunch.
Way over 200, yeah. And so what are some, would you agree that we probably all should be taking magnesium, or would you say that like no, like you can get it in your diet, and then if that's the case, what are some good sources of magnesium in your diet that we can be thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, unfortunately, with modern farming practices, our soils are just so depleted that likely we're just not getting enough in our food. I forget the percentage of Americans, but there's a quite high percentage of Americans that are deficient in magnesium. So there's definitely no harm in taking a magnesium supplement. There are different forms of magnesium. So it's also what is your outcome for magnesium? Do you want it for cognitive function? Do you want it to relieve constipation? Do you want it for muscle cramps? So like there's magnesium glycinate, magnesium citrate. Citrate is really good for constipation. That's typically, Miralax, like magnesium citrate. Glycinate is really supportive for detoxification. Then you have magnesium threonate, which is really good for cognitive function. It helps cross the blood-brain barrier. Magnesium oxide. There's so many. So I think it's just knowing, okay, why am I taking magnesium? Is it because I'm getting Charlie horses every night before I go to bed? Do I just want to actually support my organs of elimination? And so that's kind of where I would pick and choose, okay, what form of this mineral? Leafy greens are, tend to be good with magnesium. Again, we're just not getting the same amount that we would have gotten 40, 50, 60 years ago within our food.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there are some ways, but I think, because I think about, a few years ago, I started taking a magnesium supplement. I think it was in 2020, and I took it for 3 to 6 months or so. And I didn't really know why. And I took it because some influencer that I followed said that a lot of people should be taking magnesium. And I was like, okay, I'll take magnesium. Yeah. And so I went to the store and got, whatever magnesium supplement and took it for a while. And then I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I have not noticed any change in my health and in my life and energy levels and anything since I started taking it. And so I stopped. But
there's also a difference between, so like when you go to CVS or Costco or wherever you're getting your supplements, they're not therapeutic doses of the supplements, right? And so that's like companies kind of covering their ass so they don't overdose you by any means, because there can be side effects when you take too much of one supplement. Vitamin B6, for instance. We need vitamin B6 for so many different things, especially when it comes to hormones. And you can dose up to 150 milligrams, but if you stay at that for too high or too long, or you go above and beyond that, you put yourself at risk for neuropathy. So this is why when people are like, oh, I went to this store and I got all of these supplements, I'm like, oh God, we're probably going to have to throw half of them away, because there's also the standpoint of bioavailability. Are these forms of the vitamins that we can actually absorb and utilize? If that makes sense. So for you, if you didn't feel any difference with magnesium, A, you may not have needed it. B, you may not have taken the right form that you needed. Or C, it wasn't at a high enough dose. So sometimes you have to treat yourself like a human experiment in a way. Safely. Don't go buying some random supplement and say, I'm going to take this whole bottle in a day. That is really dangerous. But yeah, sometimes you have to play around with dosing.
Yeah, and I think And I think kind of this goes back to something that we've talked about before on the show in some different ways, that there is a little bit of trial and error required to be able to make meaningful change in this, that it's not some sort of thing that you can just go and pick up the first supplement off the shelf or make the first dietary change to whatever, and that's going to be the solution to everything. That like that's not a very realistic expectation for the way to approach this. Yeah,
definitely not. And everybody is so different, so everybody needs completely different things. Everybody's going to react differently to different things. So totally.
Something we like to do sometimes on this podcast when we bring on an expert in like a field that we don't know very much about, or that I think a lot of people don't know very much about, is a little bit of a conversation about like, who can I trust on this? And what are like the credentials? Is there licensure that we should be looking for? Who are the voices who actually have some backing here? And who are the voices who have a TikTok account?
I love that question. A lot of my clients are like, so I saw this thing on TikTok, and I can already tell they're like ashamed to bring it up to me because I'm like, oh my God, now what? But yeah, so it's going to vary state to state. So in North Carolina, which is where I am, you have to have a license to practice medical nutrition therapy, which is what I practice. Florida, you need a license to practice medical nutrition therapy. South Carolina, it's a free-for-all. You could take a 2-hour course on a Saturday and call yourself a nutritionist, and nobody's going to bat an eye. So, the certified nutrition specialist CNS credential is a really, renowned credential for nutritionists. So if somebody has that, listen to them. But everybody's going to have their own opinion. Everybody's going to interpret research studies some ways. Some people are just going to read titles of research studies and make conclusions. Like, for instance, I was talking with one of my business partners, and she's also a doula. And one of her clients was saying she just started taking folate because it helps increase your chance to have twins. Well, sure enough, there is a research study that says folate supplementation increases chance of conception for twins, or whatever the title was. Well, if you actually read the article, even if you just read the abstract, the conclusion was that no, the folate supplementation does not increase your chance of having twins, right? So I think it's hard to say because, again, everybody's going to have their own opinion of what works and what doesn't work. And I think you need to find somebody that's subjective and not on their own agenda. And they're looking at nutrition or healthcare, whatever kind of practitioner you see, as this individualized approach. And you're not going to see somebody that's telling everybody to do the same thing. And now nobody is having a good outcome because all bodies are different. Definitely don't get your information from a TikTok influencer. If they are a TikTok influencer with credentials, great. Just because they bought Paragard from Amazon because they heard about parasites and how everybody has them, that's really dangerous, especially when you start getting into herbs, because there's contraindications with medications. We think of how many people are on SSRIs because of, mental health. And that can cause really adverse reactions with that medication. But also, these are herbs that kill the microbiome. So then you're not replenishing your gut, and you're just causing yourself more harm at the end of the day later on. So always do your research. If you know somebody who is credentialed, then reach out to them and say, hey, I saw this. Or do you have 5 minutes where I can send you a video and hear your thoughts on X, Y, and Z? Rather than, ooh, this person told me to go do this. And like Colon Broom. Did you guys ever see ads for Colon Broom?
I saw a lot of ads for Colon Broom. Yeah.
It's psyllium husk. So I took the quiz because I was like, what is this? Like, I need to know. It's psyllium husk, and they're selling it for $65 a container. You can get psyllium husk on Amazon for $8. It's essentially Metamucil. And then people are like, oh, I didn't lose weight. Yeah, no shit, you didn't lose weight. It's fiber.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
one of the
go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really important in this conversation is that, like, especially in some of the like viral things like colon brim, or like I mean I see those like TikTok nutritionists come across my For You page all the time, or on Instagram or YouTube Shorts or whatever. And just, it's so important to be vetting those sources, that like, even if it's, even if it is like a CNS or an LN or something that like is sharing this information, like if they're sharing it on TikTok and it has 870,000 likes on it, it's not personalized for you. You have no idea if that's, even if it is coming from someone that has some backing, like everybody is different, and it's not, there are no one size fits all answers. Yeah.
And even when I post something on Instagram, I know it's not for everybody, right? But I'm hitting a specific niche, and
totally.
Somebody did a video where they put muscle stimulators on their abdomen to simulate period cramps. And so I remixed it, and I was like, this is not the same. Like, it is not inside your body contracting. But also that period cramps are not a normal thing, but it's common and it's accepted as the norm. And there were a couple women that commented that were like very upset that I said cramps were not normal. And okay, maybe for like, if you've tried everything, like, I'm not going to argue with you. And so, yeah, maybe you do, but all the clients that I've seen, when we've gotten their body to a certain point, they're like, oh my God, my period was so pleasant. Not that you guys want to really talk about periods, but...
Well, but it's important. It affects a lot of people. Yeah.
It does. So that's kind of an example of that.
Yeah. I'd imagine there's some level of like, I got to go back to like my backing and like financial planning is like, there's these fundamentals that like everyone more or less should follow, and diet or nutrition feels similar. Like you said, like kind of eat the colors of the rainbow, like have some variety in your diet. But then when you're actually trying to solve a more unique problem, it's got to be personalized, and that's something you just can't get on a medium that's broadcast to millions, if not billions, of people.
Yep, absolutely. And then I think it's discouraging because the people that don't fit into that group, again, think that they're failures, or think that it's, well, it must be me. If everybody else is seeing X, Y, and Z result, I'm the odd one out. I'm the one that can't be fixed. And those are the people I want. Like, you come to me because we will get your body systems working. But it's discouraging too. And I think that's when people are like, have the fuck it mentality of, it's not going to work for me, I'm doomed.
Yeah. Joel, do you have something else you want to add on this one, or?
No, I was going to change topics, but go for it.
Okay. Well, so I was thinking as well, you mentioned earlier, like everybody could use a little bit of GI help, whether they think they should or not. At what level would you say is like, you need to see a specialist versus like, oh yeah, like do a little bit of research into what might be affecting your body?
Yeah, I would say if you have extreme pain when you eat food, whether that's pain in your stomach, pain in your abdomen, if you are gassy, like, a little gas is normal. Gas should not smell. If it smells, there's an overgrowth happening somewhere. Even from a bloating standpoint, I think, ladies, we get really concerned about how our bellies look. And we get paranoid about the slightest amount of bloating. Well, that can be normal. But when your stomach is physically distended and you press on it and it's hard, no matter how much belly fat you do or you do not have, that's another issue. And it's good to hit these things early when you think, like, maybe if you think your digestion isn't optimized right now, okay, yeah, maybe do a little research. But if you do research and you try some things and it's not really correcting the issue, you definitely should go see some sort of specialist. Because again, it can affect so many other body systems that you have.
Yeah.
And that's typically when it's like, I don't want to say it's too late because we can heal and repair the gut, but it's kind of like this, oh shit, kind of moment, because instead of it just being this one thing, now it's 5, 6, 7, things that we're addressing.
It's become a bigger issue. Yeah.
Yeah. You can do maintenance and course corrections, or you can like wait a little bit longer and have to have more extreme measures, I guess.
Yep, totally.
So I have a question. So Jesse mentioned a little bit ago about like there's like financial, what did these call them? Fundamentals. That like kind of are in broad strokes widely applicable. Would you say there are nutritional fundamentals that can, speaking in broad strokes, apply to most people? I'll stop there.
Yeah. And this kind of brings us back to the beginning of the conversation of eating real food, right? We get so stuck on this diet or that diet and the food products associated with the diet. Like, we need to stop eating shit out of a wrapper. And not to say like all wrappers are bad, not to say if you can't pronounce an ingredient, it means you shouldn't have it. If I asked you guys what ascorbic acid was, you probably have no idea. It's vitamin C, right? So there's, different things to be aware of, but we're so far removed from just eating real food that I think we've forgotten how to do that, because there's not a nutrition label on sauteing chicken breasts in a skillet with butter. There's not a nutrition facts label on roasting potatoes in the oven, right? And so we're trying to fit these macros, which drives me crazy because it just takes us further away from eating whole foods. And so that would be, for everybody, it's okay, how do you eat majority of your meals from whole foods? Does that mean you need a meal prep program? Does that mean we occasionally need to buy frozen dishes from the freezer section? Or do we buy frozen veggies because that's all we have money for, or that's all we have time for? But it's finding sneaky ways to just bring those foods back into the diet rather than, okay, let me go get the Tyson chicken nuggets, which if you look at their ingredient list, it's a mile long. Or going to McDonald's, or, people think Chick-fil-A is like the healthy alternative. Well, if you actually look at their ingredients, they brine their chicken in MSG, but nobody really knows that. Go ahead.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt. I'm trying to do that last, but that's a separate thing.
It's okay. I go on tangents.
Yeah. Now I already have interrupted, so we're just going to ask the question. Can you provide a few ideas just off the cuff of if someone wanted to be eating these real foods? What are some like meal recipes for that, or just some basic meal ideas to start doing more of that?
Well, I think we overcomplicate cooking, and I think that's what deters a lot of people away from cooking, because they're like, ooh, I saw this recipe on Pinterest and it has 20 different ingredients, and you're like, screw that, never mind. So it's find seasonings you like. I'm Italian, so salt, pepper, garlic, that's, all I need in my cabinet, to be perfectly honest. So finding the spices that you like, and go on YouTube, like find some videos of how do you saute a chicken breast or how do you roast it. And gosh, even if we don't know how to do these things, go get a crock pot. Put the chicken breast in the crock pot, or um, turkey, or whatever else it's going to be. Get an air fryer and buy sausages, some sort of protein. And then from a veggie standpoint, you can roast them, you can saute them, you can boil them or steam them, whatever you like. So roasting is going to have a little more of a caramelized effect, versus boiling is kind of bland. Sauteing is, I would say, middle of the road. But just season it with whatever seasons you like. Is it oregano? Is it rosemary? Is it thyme? Is it cumin? Is it turmeric? Saffron, whatever it is. And that's all you really need. You don't need this 20 list of ingredients. And then get a rice cooker, right? Wash your rice or grains, whatever, quinoa, rice, farro, barley. Cook them in a rice cooker. Cook a big batch so that it's just in the fridge ready to go. And then, I don't have time to cut vegetables or blah, blah, blah. Okay, buy pre-cut vegetables or go buy a bag of frozen vegetables, and steam it that way. So from a recipe standpoint, and then you can make it whatever you want, right? So we have our protein, we have veg, we have starch. You need a little bit of fat. So whether you want like avocado oil or coconut oil or actual avocado, whatever it is, add a little bit of that to your plate, or sometimes we're cooking in those fats. And just being able to put these foods on a plate rather than, oh, well, I need to get this lean cuisine because this is what fits my macros for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So it really is kind of some of those, I don't know, I feel like this is what I learned when I was like 10. And then the last like 10, 15 years have been like, well, kind of like you're saying, like, oh, these are your macros, these are your things to hit. But it really is like you want protein, starch, vegetables, stuff from the produce aisle is probably pretty good. And then make it taste good.
Yeah. And the other thing too is don't force yourself to eat foods you don't like. Like I had a client where we called it her mindful phases and her stressful phases. So stressful was she didn't care. She ate whatever she wanted. Nothing mattered. And her mindful phase, in quotation marks, was she ate roasted chicken and Brussels sprouts for every day. And I was like, that could not have been enjoyable. And she was like, you know what? After a while, it really wasn't. And then we'd go back to the stressful phase where you could have whatever you want, whenever you want, because God, if I have to think about eating another like roasted chicken and plate of Brussels sprouts, like boring. So again, and that's adding seasoning. So Brussels sprouts, for instance, go get some bacon, chop up some bacon, put it in a frying pan, let that cook, throw in the Brussels, saute them a little bit in there, throw it in the oven, get it nice and crispy, right? So that's just another way to, okay, now we have fat, we have protein, and we have Brussels sprouts. You should probably eat more protein than just the bacon because let's be honest, bacon is really just fat. But just another way to think about cooking veggies that's completely different from, just the boiled Brussels sprouts.
Don't just boil them and add a little salt. Yeah.
Yeah. There's creative ways to do that, right? And I think that's experiment. Again, I think that's one of the things that, like, as we talked about earlier with some of these supplements and some of these different things with your health, like, and with your diet, like, play around with it. Like, if you want to eat more vegetables, if you want to eat more broccoli, carrots, Brussels sprouts, whatever, play around with different ways to prepare them, because they really can be very good and very tasty and not as
Yeah.
boring as they sometimes
Right.
get the reputation that they are. But
Yeah, the first joke I ever told my dad, and he frequently reminds me of this, is I came home from kindergarten. I was like, what's the difference between Brussels sprouts and boogers? Kids don't eat Brussels sprouts. And he thought it was so funny, but if you think about it, it's true. Like, they can just, vegetables can be bitter and unpleasant. So, not that boogers are the way to go, but
yeah.
And then another sign too, to if you do start incorporating more veggies into your diet and you notice your gut health seems a million times worse, that's a big red flag of the microbiome of your gut is really unhappy. And that is also another time to see a specialist.
Gotcha.
That's
Gotcha.
great. That's great. Well, Elena, I do want to be respectful of time, both to you and also to our listeners. And so, listeners, if you want more, just listen to past episodes. But, Elena, where can people find more of you if their interest has been piqued and they want to pursue this further?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. It's at Heal Holistic Nutrition. You can find me on my website, healholisticnutrition.com. And if you're like, oh my gosh, she seems cool, I want to work with her, you can always book a free 15-minute discovery call and learn a little bit more about my process and if I can actually help you.
I love it.
Yeah, that's me.
I love it.
Awesome.
We will link all of those in the description below in the show notes for people's convenience. Elena, do you have any parting thoughts before we close this off?
I think parting thoughts is to stick to your gut, figuratively and literally. Do what feels right for your body. If you know that something feels off, don't be afraid to question it. And keep questioning practitioners until you find somebody who is going to explore it with you. Because if you feel like garbage, there's probably a reason for that. And just because somebody hasn't given you an answer doesn't mean there isn't an answer.
That's great. That's a lot of wisdom.
Really good stuff.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Very cool.
Thanks.
Well, Elena, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you guys.
Learned a lot.
Yes. Tune in next week for another episode of Becoming Ourselves.